Now I'm going to review with you the contract of sale in New Jersey. And this is the standard form contract that we use when writing an offer on a property. This is also sometimes referred to as the NAJAR contract, which stands for New Jersey Association of Realtors contract. But it is the contract that's used for condominium purchases, single family homes, and multifamily homes up to 4 units. If it's a property above 4 units, that contract would have to be written by attorneys. If it is a cooperative purchase, a co-op purchase, that also would have to be, that contract would have to be written by attorneys. We do not write, agents do not write cooperative contracts. So first page of this contract is sometimes referred to as what's called Opinion 26. And this states that as a real estate agent, how do I represent the customer who's making the offer? And I can represent the seller, I can represent the buyer, I can represent both the buyer and the seller, neither the buyer and the seller. So that has to be checked on how the agent who's writing this contract represents the person who's making the offer. Also, it states in here that realtors are not attorneys. And if you need any legal advice, you should consult with a lawyer. So the buyer will review this page and they will sign this along with their agent. And then the following pages are the meat of the actual contract. I'll link this down below for you to review. I'm not going to go over every line. However, I'll go over the main points. In New Jersey, this contract is subject to an attorney review period once the contract has been fully executed by both the buyer and seller, meaning that the contract is signed by both buyer and seller and it's accepted. They enter into what's called an attorney review period. So starting at the top here, it says this is a legally binding contract that will become final within 3 business days. During this period, you may choose to consult an attorney who can review and cancel the contract. See attorney review section for details. That attorney review period only begins if the contract is signed by both buyer and seller. By a buyer presenting an offer in a contract form, the clock is not ticking on attorney review. The clock only starts ticking if the offer is accepted and the seller has signed the contract and that contract has been delivered. That executed contract has been delivered to all parties, meaning it's been delivered to the buyer and then delivered to the seller. Attorney review, holidays don't count, weekends don't count. It's 3 business days, but it's always longer. Attorneys, the first thing they do once the review period starts is they'll send out their letter to the seller's attorney saying, I disapprove the contract and I'm formally extending review. On average, I've had attorney reviews take like 3 to 5 days. I've had them take a day if everyone's in agreement with everything. But on average, they're about a week. I've seen some that last longer. But running through the contract here, so you have the parties of the transaction, who's the buyer, who's the seller, their address. Now line 36, this is the property address, the actual property that you're making the offer on, what town it is in, the county, the lot and block number on the tax map. That's how the city views the property legally. Qualifier, if it's a condominium, they'll have a unit number, so that's the qualifier. And then starting on line 43, this is the purchase price. So you have the purchase price that you're offering. Line 45 has to do with initial deposit. In New Jersey, many agents stopped collecting like the $1,000 quote good faith deposit that we used to take. It just became there's a lot of legal issues with how long we can hold the checks for and things like that. So normally what we'll do is we'll just bundle that initial deposit into the additional deposit. So if you're purchasing a property, say for $500,000 and you're putting down 20%, your initial deposit is probably somewhere in the 5 to 10% range. So that amount would be on line 45, 46, the additional deposit. And then the amount that you're financing, if you're getting a loan, would be on line 47. So say you're getting a loan for $400,000, that would go there. And the balance of the purchase price would be the remaining deposit. So if you're putting down, say, 20%, normally you would put down, say, 10% after attorney review period, and then the remaining 10% would come at closing. So that remaining 10% of what's owed in the purchase would be the balance of the purchase price, and that would go on that line. And then this is also like who's holding the money, who is the check made out to, when is the deposits due, that's all here. Most of the time, the deposits are held by the seller's attorney, but that would be spelled out here as far as who the escrowee is, or if it's a title company holding the money. So that would all be outlined there. This whole section, starting at line 66, section D, has to do with the mortgage and how much is the mortgage amount, what kind of loan is the buyer getting, the term of the loan, meaning like is it a 30-year mortgage, a 15-year mortgage. Most of the time, people just put 30 years there because they might change that when they apply. And then this has to do with your mortgage commitment. And basically, you have 30 days, unless it's changed, to obtain a fully committed loan once you apply for it, meaning that you've applied for the mortgage, it's gone through underwriting, you've supplied all the documents to the lender, they've done an appraisal on the property, and they come back and say, yep, we are issuing Mr. Buyer, Mrs. Buyer, a fully committed loan. We're ready to fund the loan. We're ready to close. So you have about 30 days from the conclusion of attorney review to obtain the loan commitment. So that's outlined here, unless it's negotiated into a different amount of time. And then line 94 has to do with when is the closing taking place, or the proposed closing date. So we would put that there. Say you want to close in 60 days, we would put the targeted closing date would be here. Items included in the sale. So on the listing in the multiple listing service, it will say what items are included in the sale from the seller, or the appliances, or any light fixtures included, any furniture, whatever is outlined in that MLS agreement. That on the listing, that would be added here. And then what's excluded. So if the seller is specifically excluding something from the premises, personal property, or they're going to be taking with them a light fixture, as long as that was spelled out in the on the multiple listing service, we would put that here as far as what is not included in the sale. A lot of this has to do with certificate of occupancy. If there's an assessment from the town, some of these items we may not know, but that could also be clarified during the attorney review period. Line 186 has to do with what kind of property are you purchasing? Is it a condominium? Is it a multifamily? Is it a two-family, single family? We have to spell that out there. Line 200, are there tenants living in the property? Is that applicable or not applicable? If you're buying the property with a tenant, say you're an investor, we have to put the information on who the tenant is, their rent, the term, etc. Starting in line 215, this has to do with lead paint. Prior to any property built before 1978 has the possibility of lead paint in it. I'm discussing in the next video regarding lead paint and lead paint disclosure forms that the seller has completed, but is it applicable or not applicable? And then it talks about lead paint, your right to do a lead paint inspection if you want. Starting on line 231, this all has to do with inspections. And basically you have, according to the contract, built into the contract, there is a home inspection contingency unless it has been waived or removed as part of the offer or limited as part of the offer. But basically in the contract, the buyer has a right to do an inspection, and that inspection is within 14 calendar days of the end of the attorney review period, unless it is changed in the offer or renegotiated. Technically in New Jersey, line 367, all properties are sold in as-is condition. You as the buyer, as long as you have a mortgage contingency in the contract, have the right to perform a home inspection. I'll always recommend that a buyer perform a home inspection, even if they decide to limit or waive the home inspection contingency, because you want to know what you're getting into when you purchase the property. It is well worth the investment in time and the cost for doing a home inspection. But that is all outlined here. But as I mentioned, in New Jersey, all properties are sold in as-is condition. You can perform a home inspection and you can make requests to the seller for repairs, credits, things like that. But the seller does not have to do anything. Many sellers do work with buyers on certain items to fix or credit. Usually the point of a home inspection is to look for major catastrophic items that we are not seeing inside the property. Electrical, structural, major plumbing issues, things that only a home inspector would be able to really uncover once they start to dig into that property. Cosmetic issues are rarely addressed, scratches in floors, things like that. But you're making an offer on a property. The seller has not said anything about the condition of the appliances, but we find out during the home inspection that the dishwasher is not working. You can request a repair or a credit to the seller, they could choose to repair or credit or not. Then you can make the decision if you wish to move forward or not. I have seen people terminate contracts over home inspection issues, but it's usually for major items, structural things that were like way above what they thought they were getting into. So this whole section discusses home inspection. In New Jersey, in 2024, a new law went into place where a seller must complete a seller's disclosure, which I'm discussing in another video in this series. In the seller's disclosure, they also have to discuss the flood zone and flood risk of the property. So that's also discussed here. And in the seller's disclosure, which the buyer will review prior to making the offer, they'll also have that outlined as far as the flood risk and the flood, where the property sits in the flood map. So they are aware of the flood zone the property is in. Other items here, a lot of this is standard. Just scrolling through. Line 591 has to do with the realtors who are involved in the transaction, who they are, how are they representing, who's representing the seller, are they acting as a buyer's agent, dual agent, designated agent, transaction broker. If more than one agent and firm is being represented, how are they representing in the transaction? So that's all outlined here. This whole section starting on line 605 has to do with the brokers that are involved and the commission. Who's paying the commission to the listing side? Is it coming from the buyer or the seller? On the participating broker, who's on the buy side of the transaction, how are they being compensated? Is the compensation coming from the seller? Is it coming from the buyer? We discussed in a previous video buyer's agency agreements that outline how compensation is being paid, or if an offer is being made where the seller is being compensating their agent. But this is all here as far as who's being paid and how are they being paid, and which party are they being paid from. So that's all here in the contract. If the seller or buyer has a real estate license, that has to be disclosed. So that would be checked off here. Broader explanation starting on line 660 of the attorney review period. And then finally, starting on line 722, additional contractual provisions. This is an area where we can add language as part of your offer. So if you wanted to waive a contingency, like you're buying all cash, there would be no mortgage contingency. We would say the buyer is waiving the mortgage contingency. Or if you were limiting the home inspection to a certain dollar amount, or you were reducing the time frame for a home inspection, or if you were making an offer with a concession in here where towards closing costs, or you were authorizing the seller to pay the buyer's agent, that would all go in the conditional contractual provisions section. And then you would sign it, and then your agent would sign it as well. All the pages would be initialed, and we would present this to the seller's agent. I know I went through a lot here, but I'll link down below a link to this document to review if you have any questions about it. But I wanted to go over the basic ins and outs of the contract. By presenting an offer in contract form, you are not bound to the property. Your only attorney review period, the clock only starts ticking once the contract is signed and executed by the seller and it has been delivered. So I just wanted to go over and make sure you understand that. That in New Jersey, we present offers in contract form. Down below, you'll find a link to the contract. If you have any further questions about this document, you can reach out to me anytime at walter@livingonthehudson.com or at 347-448-3766. Have a great day.